just so okay, but it can't see any of you, it's just the screen. So right now we're talking about positive and negative feedback loops. And what was your name? Yeah, nice to meet you. If you wouldn't mind to sign in for me using the QR code. I think if you have an Apple phone, you can just do it with your camera. And you can, since today is Thursday, you can just put in as Thursday when it gives you the option for the. Okay, so we're talking about negative feedback. When your body is warm, your blood vessels will dilate to allow more blood to go to your skin, right? That's important because when we sweat, we're releasing heat, right? And we're cooling ourselves down. So when your body's warm, we dilate our blood vessels, right? Our vessels meaning they get bigger. We allow more blood to travel to the skin. And what does that do? It warms us up. Oh, wait. Cools us down, yeah. Right? So the ending product is that our body cools down. Okay? So what are the key points here? What would you say is what defines this as a negative feedback loop?
Because it's not doing the same thing. It's going from warm to cold.
Right.
So it's negative feedback. It's not like continuing the same pattern.
Okay, that's a great way to think about it. Anyone else have something to add to that? Why do we know that this is a negative feedback loop? Oops. So that's a great observation. And if you want to think about it as in terms of the stimulus and the response, the stimulus is your body is warm, right? Your response is the dilation of your blood vessels, okay? And our body cools down. So by dilating our vessels, we are decreasing the temperature of our body, right? So we're decreasing that stimulus. We're decreasing the warmth of our body, okay? So whenever you see that your stimulus is decreased by your response, that is negative feedback. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? So what if I reverse this? What if I said that my body is hot, right? And I want to cool myself down. So, okay. So let's work through this one, and I'll write this one in blue, or I'll do green actually. So let's test that hypothesis. So our body is cold, okay, and so we dilated our blood vessels when we were hot. What do you think we're going to do when we're cold? Are we going to dilate our blood vessels, or are we going to constrict them? Constrict. Yeah, we're going to constrict them. So we're going to have vasoconstriction. This sounds like a daunting word, but really vaso just means vessel, constriction to decrease, right? You're shortening. Okay, so when your body is cold, we're going to constrict our vessels. And that's important because constricting our vessels means that less blood is going to our skin. So more blood's being kept in the core of our body. Why do you think we want to keep more blood in the core middle part of our body?
Keep our organs alive.
Right.
Because we can do without a finger, but we can do without our organs.
Exactly, right? We have really important stuff in here, right? We have our heart, we have a respiratory system. We need all of that to have plenty of nutrients. So when our body is cold, we constrict our blood vessels, and our body warms up. Okay? So if we think about it, if our initial stimulus is cold, right, our response is to constrict, and that constricting warms us up. So we're changing, or right, we're decreasing the amount of cold in our body. That makes sense? Okay. So even if we're not physically decreasing our temperature, but we're decreasing the degree of cold in our body. Okay. So when you think of negative feedback, think about maintaining homeostasis. And that'll come up in our quiz, but can anyone tell me what homeostasis is?
Like keeping your body balanced in all its systems.
Perfect. I could have said it better myself. Yeah, perfect. So this is an example of thermoregulation, right? Regulating our body's temperature. And so when we're doing this, our body likes to be at a certain temperature, right? And so when we go away from that temperature, whether we're colder or hotter, our body's going to do whatever it can to bring us back up to that, to bring us back to that normal range, okay? So in order to do that, we're either going to dilate our blood vessels, right, to decrease our temperature, or constrict them so we can increase our body's temperature, right? So if ever we're trying to get back to a set point, a set range, that's going to be negative feedback, okay? So when you think of negative feedback, think of maintaining homeostasis, okay? So, maintaining homeostasis, okay? Do you feel a bit better about negative? Okay, so let's now go to positive. Positive is pretty much the opposite of negative feedback, right? So in this situation, the end product increases the stimulus. End product increases the stimulus. Right? So does anyone know an example of a positive feedback loop? Yeah, right. How so?
That I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's all right. So this is positive. So what happens is whenever a woman is about to go into labor, her body will release hormones. Okay, so release hormones. This release of hormones causes contractions, right? The woman starts to deliver the baby. So the ending product is contractions. Since I told you that this is a positive feedback loop, how do you think contractions will influence the release of hormones and vice versa?
So the contractions are the end product and they increase the stimulus, which is the release hormone, so that's why it's positive.
Right. It's like a vicious cycle, right? So I release my hormones. My hormones cause contractions. I have contractions, and those contractions cause the release of even more hormones. So this keeps happening over and over and over again. It's a chaotic cycle, right? We're not maintaining homeostasis here, okay? So positive feedback usually happens for a short amount of time because it's deviating from homeostasis, okay? So big take-home picture, for negative feedback, your ending product decreases the stimulus. For positive feedback loop, your end product increases the stimulus. This is a pretty important topic, so I would know the difference between these two. And to feel comfortable with the examples given in class, which this is thermoregulation and labor are the two examples that were given. But, so do you guys feel a little bit better? Any questions about that? Are there any other questions that you want to ask before we jump into Kahoot, or are you guys ready to just go ahead and get started? Okay. All right. Okay, there's your code. All right, is everyone in? All right, is everyone in that wants to be in, or?
I'm still waiting. I'll sign it really fast.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Let me know. So while we're waiting, so there, I'm gonna show you on the black. So since finals are coming up, right? Get excited. So since our finals are coming up, I'm gonna go ahead and share with you guys something that I put in Blackboard for you all to help you start preparing. So I think, and you guys all have access to your previous exams, correct? And I imagine if, she would give you access to them. It can be, since your exam is cumulative, right? It can be kind of daunting to think about having a cumulative exam. But I recommend that you do an exam analysis for each of your exams. So what this does is it gives you a space to write down all the questions that you got wrong, right? And what topics those questions came from. So then, once it comes to studying for your final, you know where you need to focus because you already saw where your weak points are, okay? So here gives you an opportunity to write down the question, the topic, the answer, and why that was right, and why you missed that question. So then you can focus your studying on the important parts of the exam. And also, since she already told you that she's going to take your questions from your previous exams and from your homework, she's already told you what the important topics are, right? So no need to waste energy on studying topics that she didn't cover in the exam or in your homework, right? So this way you can document what topics she actually covered, so then when you're studying, you can just study those topics and maximize your score. So I'll give you plenty of space to write down the questions you got wrong and why you got them wrong and analyze them. And then the second part to really getting a good study plan together is thinking about what you would improve in your studying plan itself, right? So here you can write down whether you achieved your goal in that exam, how did you prepare for that exam, how long did you study, how long did you give yourself to prepare for it, how did you feel when you got to that exam, did you feel prepared or not, what resources did you use, did you read your notes, did you make flashcards, did you watch videos, what did you do? And then, based on your answers, how would you change anything first? And if you would, what would you change? So then you can decide, make a study plan that will work best for you and will help you achieve your goal in the class and in other classes too. So, if you're interested in that, I put the exam analysis. It's in the SI tab and it's just on the bottom. Okay. So a little thing there if you'd like. Any questions about that? I guess I'm just signing back in. Sorry. No, you're good.
Oh, there I am.
Okay, yeah, you're good. All right, so we'll go ahead and start. Okay, awesome. So you guys are feeling confident about that, and that's great. So I would definitely know those, and you already do, but that usually something that comes up will give me points. So, great. All right. Definitely the same question. Okay. So what was the difference between this question and the first question?
This is asking for the 4 domains, and the first one is asking for the 4 that you carry.
Right. Well, the kingdoms of eukaryotes, right? So for the kingdoms, you knew what those were. And can someone remind me what our progression, our taxonomy model is? Does anyone know what that is? Remember all of them in order?
Domain,
Domain, kingdom.
starts with a C.
Feed. Domain, kingdom, phylum.
Class,
Uh-huh.
order,
Family, genus, and species. So I like to think of this as a pyramid, right? So at the top, we're the most specific, and at the bottom, gosh, these marks. At the bottom is the most broad, okay? So domain, the domain will encompass the most organisms. And as you go up, you're getting more and more specific, right? Like as I'm thinking, humans and fish would both be in the same domain, but humans and fish would not be in the same species, right? So when I'm asking for the domains of life, I'm asking for the 3 broad domains of life, the very bottom of the barrel. And so that would be bacteria, eukarya, and protists. Oh, I'm sorry, archaea. Protists in the and archaea. And archaea are just like extremophiles. Hey, Aaron, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Are you?
Good. If you wouldn't mind to sign it, I think we have some sheets floating around. And also, the game code is on the board if you want to play.
My phone died, so I'll just kind of sit back.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So these are extremophiles, and we don't really talk about them, so you don't have to worry about them too much. But these 2 guys you'll want to know. So bacteria, eukarya, archaea are our 3 broad domains of life. Okay? All right, so any other questions about that? All right, well, we will just move on then. Okay. All right, awesome. Yep. So this is kind of a throwback to exam 2, 2 or 3. But it comes up here because our plants are a domain or a kingdom in eukaryotes, right? So great. Can anyone tell me any other aspects of plants that weren't shown on here?
they're autotroph, they make their own food.
Right, exactly, right, converting energy from the sun into food, right? Anyone else, any other things, any other characteristics?
That contains chloroplasts and those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly, awesome. Yep, anything else? You guys got the main things, so great. We'll move on. Yep, so those are all of our examples of fungi. She said you would want to know that for the exam, and you do, so that's great. But yeah, so any questions about? All right. Next question. Awesome. What are fungi? Well, how do they obtain their nutrients if they're not heterotrophic? Are they autotrophic? No? I see handshakes. What are fungi? Aaron?
I might be way off here, but like, are they decomposers?
Yeah.
Is that their thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but what does that mean, Aaron? What does that mean to say that fungi are decomposers?
So I'm guessing heterotrophic, I honestly don't like that vocab word, but I'm guessing that means you attack other things to eat them or you feed off of other animals,
Okay.
stuff like that. Is that what that means?
So yeah, you're taking nutrients from other inorganic molecule.
Okay.
So using other flesh.
Yeah.
For decomposers, it's already like they're feeding off the dead material, and so there's other things there, not just like the carbon molecules. But the important right is that they are decomposers. They're eating decaying material or dead material. Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Any questions? Okay, we have a toss-up. All right, so 3 types of symmetry. So we do have 3 types of symmetry. Does anyone remember what those are?
Bilateral, radial, asymmetrical.
Mm-hmm. And you'll want to know these as well. Bilateral, radial, and asymmetrical. Okay. So what does bilateral mean? What do you guys think bilateral means? That you have bilateral symmetry? Or can you just think of an example of an organism that has bilateral symmetry?
A beetle, so you cut it in half, it's like the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So beetle, also us, right? We have bilateral symmetry. Right. So meaning that you cut us in half, we're the same on both sides. And so characteristically, we are active as adults, right? Going out and hunting their prey. Okay? What about radial symmetry? What does that mean? Well, radial symmetry, think of a jellyfish, right? Like the head of a jellyfish is circular, right? And so there's no defined right or left side. And so with radial symmetry, those organisms are usually sessile as adults, or they rely on currents for food. So like for jellyfish, you see like the tentacle parts, right? And they have that like inside of their jellyfish head thing that looks kind of weird. But what they're doing is they're catching molecules, food particles in the water. As the water flows through the tentacles, through the jellyfish head, it's catching that nutrients, okay? So jellyfish, they don't move that often. They rely on the water to move food to them, okay? So they're more sessile than organisms with bilateral symmetry. What does asymmetrical mean?
That's just where there's no defined symmetry and that you can cut it in half and it will completely, or not completely, but like different on each side, no matter which way you cut it.
Exactly, right? There's no line of symmetry there, right? So to help, symmetrical, where we know what symmetrical means, and the prefix a means not. So atypical, asymmetrical means not symmetrical. So we have no line of symmetry. right? An example of this would be coral, right? Coral have no line of symmetry and they're completely sessile as adults, okay? So this is kind of a trick question because we can't say that all animals are sessile, right? Our animals usually with asymmetrical and some with radiochemistry are sessile, but we have some that are mobile as well. So we can't say that all animals are not sessile. All right, so any questions about anything here? Oh, we already did this. Oh, well. Yeah, great. We just talked about it.
What is sigmoidal?
Sigmoidal, actually, that was covered in our first exam, right? The shapes of the graphs, right? Huh? I think that's the same. Yeah, I forgot that she didn't name it as sigmoidal, but it's kind of the same.
Oh, it's just the graphs, like the
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, in my metabolism class we call it sigmoidal, but for you it's science. But yeah, thank you for correcting me on that. Okay. Great. What should this sentence say?
With the backbone.
Right. Vertebrates are animals with a backbone. And I would know some examples of, does anyone have any examples of vertebrates from the lecture? Right, us. What's the broad name?
Mammals?
Mammals, right? Chordates, right? What about invertebrates?
Insects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, insects, right, because they have the exoskeleton.
Snakes? Reptiles?
Snakes actually do have a backbone.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like snails, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mollusks, right? Mollusks. And annelids, right? You want to know what annelids are? Worms. On to the next question. Yeah. Jumping the gun on these.
Yeah, that takes a bit.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Right, so you probably, right, all of the above. And you want to remember what echinoderms are?
Are they a type of insect?
No, so they're like sea cucumbers, right? They have like a harder inside and a soft outside. Yeah. They're kind of crazy looking, but that's like a sea cucumber. So I'll just remember that all these are examples of invertebrates. Okay. So all of these, right, are examples of vertebrates. We have our amphibians, our reptiles, and our fish. Am I missing a type of vertebrate here? Hmm? Exactly, right? Mammals would also be included here. So, yeah. Any questions about this?
Wouldn't birds be included?
So birds are actually now included in the reptiles. Because dinosaurs, so you probably heard that birds evolved from dinosaurs. And recent studies, I think it's like in the past few years, have found that birds should be included in the reptiles categorization. Just instead of scales, they have feathers.
They had one thing I saw recently where it was like a chicken and they changed one chromosome. It was either one chromosome, I don't know what the exact term is. But they changed one thing in it and its beak, if you look at the skulls, the beak automatically resembles more like an alligator type thing than like an actual chicken. That just shows how closely they are. It's just like one gene away to change their phenotype completely into that kind of thing.
That's crazy. What were you reading?
It was on BBC.
Oh, I'm gonna find that. It's cool. Sounds frightening as well. You don't want to see a chicken with an alligator. Right, ever in my life. Okay. So bacteria are very small cells, but we're speaking specifically about the cells of the body, right? So does anyone remember, like, because cells are our smallest anatomical units. Can anyone take me from cells to the organism?
Cells make up tissue, tissue make up organs,
Mm-hmm.
organs make up organ system makes up organism.
Yep. All right. So is this cool with everyone? Can anyone give me examples of the tissues? You remember the four?
Nervous.
Right. Nervous. Anyone else? What else we have? Epithelial. Yeah. Anyone else? Connective. Anyone else? There's one more. Muscle. I would remember these as well. So these are your four types of tissues, right? And these are all made from cells, right? So our cells work together, interact to make tissues, right? And our different tissues interact to make organs. So what's one or an example of an organ that we've talked about a lot in class? We talked about several, so you could say many different ones. But can you give me an example of an organ we talked about in class extensively?
Kidney.
Kidney. Who else? Large intestine. Anyone else?
Heart.
Heart. Yeah, right. And we kind of see how different tissues are integrating to make those organs, right? Like for the heart, we have muscle, right? The heart is physically a pump. We also have epithelial tissue, right, surrounding it for protection. We also have connective tissue, right? So we have a lot of different tissues interacting to make our organs, okay? And then we have our organ systems, right? We've talked about two extensively in class. What are those two that we talked about? Yeah, we did talk about respiratory. Anyone else?
Cardiovascular.
Digestive. Yeah, right? The cardiovascular digestive system, we talked about extensively. We also talked about respiratory. We talked a little about endocrine, right? So we're seeing how our organs are coming together to achieve homeostasis, right? To regulate our body's functioning. Okay, and all of our systems, right? You probably saw there like, a lot. All of those come together to make our organism. Okay? And I don't know if I mentioned this, I think we'll talk about it a little later, but I would know some general functions of each of the systems. You don't have to know all the nitty-gritty details, but I would at least be able to differentiate between them, right? So maybe just a bullet point definition of what they do. Okay. Kind of like the assignment or the projects you did in class, where it was like matching. If you feel comfortable with that, then I'd say you're pretty good. All right, any other questions? Oh, gosh, I jumped the gun on all these questions, I'm sorry. Yeah, great. Awesome. What is lymphatic? What is it? Right, the lymphatic system, right? Awesome, great. All right, so. Yep, it's an organ. Great. Okay. Can anyone explain to me why it's muscle?
Because your stomach is a muscle, and the digestive tract leads to your stomach, and goes out of your stomach, and so it's a muscle.
Okay. Maybe anyone else? Aaron?
Isn't epithelial tissue, that's the kind that absorbs stuff, right? So that's the stuff that like coats the intestine, but the actual muscle tissue is what moves the food along to continue being absorbed and processed through it. That's why the actual muscle is what moving it along.
Great. Anyone else have anything to add? Awesome, thank you both. So yeah, what you'll see, right, and what you've probably already seen studying cardiovascular and digestive extensively, is that the types of tissue kind of have specific functions, and they use that similarly in the different systems. So epithelial tissue is responsible for absorption, right? You see that in the small intestine, right, with our villi, and we're absorbing nutrients in our small intestine. The muscles are kind of our workhorses of the body, right? They allow us to have movement, right? Generate force. And, you know, that's quite obvious, right, when we think about our legs, right, or our arms allow us to move, run, to pick up things, right? And in the digestive tract, we use muscles to push food along the tract. So physical contracting and relaxation of our muscles, of our intestine, move food along, okay? Epithelial tissue is important in the digestive tract, and like Aaron said, epithelial tissue is responsible for absorption. So that is in the small intestine. I almost said nervous or connective, so. Yeah. So does that clear things up of why the answer to this was muscle? Great. So can anyone tell me why they thought this was the endocrine system?
I just know the endocrine system produces hormones.
Exactly, right. So this is tricky because the endocrine system and the nervous system do similar things, right? It's communicating. However, the endocrine system is concerned with hormones, which are chemical messengers, whereas the nervous system is electrical messages, right, through our neurons. Okay, so that's really the difference there. Endocrine, think hormones and chemicals. Nervous, think electrical impulses through the nerves. Okay? Awesome. Awesome, right? I bet you all could tell me, what was a big takeaway of why this was the lymphatic system? Right, lymph, right? Sounds pretty nice. The lymphatic system is concerned with taking lymph from our tissues and returning it back to the bloodstream. And it checks this lymph for any pathogens or anything that should be scary to the body, kind of like your bodyguard for the body, the first line of defense. But I think in class there was a little bit of confusion distinguishing between the immune system and the lymphatic system. But to get this clear, if it's concerned with lymph, it's the lymphatic system. Okay, and that would be in the definition probably, because that's really what the lymphatic system is concerned about. Can anyone tell me what the integumentary system is?
Your skin, your hair, nails.
Yeah, awesome. All of that, right? Your skin, your hair, your nails. This is your protective barrier, right? Protect all of our important things in our body. Awesome, thank you. What about the reproductive system?
It has all the reproductive organs.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the urinary system. What's that one? What's the importance of the urinary system? Huh?
I think isn't it filtered?
You said that about tobacco. You said that about tobacco?
No.
Oh, I don't know why.
Isn't it like to take your blood out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of a thing between the urinary and the digestive system, right? Because when we talk about the digestive system, we say that we are excreting waste, right, from the small intestine. I mean, from the large intestine. But the thing is, the large intestine, we're excreting solid waste, right, stool, that was not able to be digested. The urinary system is excreting toxins that were in our body. That were in our blood. Okay, so urinary system is cleaning our blood, and the digestive system is just getting rid of waste, solid waste that we couldn't digest. Okay. All right, next question. And this should be environment prior to that. All right. So homeostasis this is a trick question. So I'm very happy with all of your answers because these two are both right. Even if you said homeostasis. But homeostasis is right, the body's way of maintaining a stable environment, but thermal regulation is a type of homeostasis, right, where we're specifically regulating the body's temperature. Okay? Any questions or anything like that? Awesome, you guys. Perfect score. What should I do to fix this question? Awesome, right? Because we need to cool ourselves down, right? Any questions about that? Awesome. All right. So in a feedback loop, we have sensors and effectors, okay? Your sensors are the cells that receive the signal, while your effectors are what carry out the response, okay? So just remember, your sensor is what senses the change, your effectors are what carry out that change. Okay, for example, for the vasoconstriction due to it being cold outside, what would be the sensor? That would be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I can't remember. It starts with an HY, I think. Right? Maybe.
Oh, were you thinking about the hypothalamus?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the intermediate.
Okay.
That's like we call that the control center.
Okay.
But your sensors will be like neurons or nerves, right? That sense the cold. They would send a message to the hypothalamus, and then the hypothalamus would send a message to the effector. And the effector in this case would be your vessels, right? Your vasals will constrict, which will help you to warm up the interior of your body, or the central part of your body. Okay, so sensors sense the stimulus. Effectors carry out the change. Awesome, great. Okay, so yeah, you're right. Negative feedback loop is decreasing the initial stimulus. What would this have to say to be positive feedback loop?
Increases.
Right, like with contractions, right? Release hormones, contract, release more hormones, contract more, right? Awesome. Any questions about feedback loops? All right, so the act of maintaining that temperature would be classified as homeostasis, right? Maintaining homeostasis. But being at a specific point, a specific degree, that's saying that's a set point. So 98.6 degrees would be the body's set point for temperature, right? That's where we try to stay at all times. Okay, does that make sense? Set point. So your body can operate at its optimum level. All right, master coordinator physiological functions. So when we talk about the sensory and the effectors, this is the area of the brain that would be concerned with receiving those signals and then carrying out a response, okay, in order to maintain a certain level, right? For example, heat. So this would be your hypothalamus. So your sensors would sense the stimulus, right? They would send a message to the hypothalamus, the hypothalamus part of the brain. The hypothalamus would then send a message to the effector to carry out that change, okay? So your hypothalamus is the part of the brain that deals with those nerves. Right? Any other questions about that? All right, great. So what system am I talking about here of the body?
Endocrine.
The endocrine system, right? And so when you see signaling, automatically think, okay, this is probably either the nervous system or the endocrine system. But I told you what are the chemical signaling molecules. So if it's chemical signaling molecules, that's going to be hormones, right? If I said electrical, right, then that would be the nervous system, okay? But your chemical signaling molecules are the hormones. They are active in the endocrine system and they are released by the pituitary gland. Okay? Any questions about that? All right. All right, next. All right, so fantastic. You guys were knew that it was insulin and glucagon. Great. So insulin actually tells our body to decrease our blood sugar. What happens is after you eat a meal, right, you have a bunch of sugars and things in your blood. Insulin is released to tell your cells to take that up, right, so that they can be nourished, right? Glucagon, however, operates in the opposite condition. So let's say you're starving, you're really, really hungry. Your body needs nutrients, but you haven't eaten anything, so your blood doesn't have anything in there. When glucagon is released, it signals your liver to start producing glucose and to release that glucose into the bloodstream to nourish your tissues. Okay? So think when you've eaten, right, you need to take up that nutrients, take up those sugars, insulin is active. But if you're starving and you need sugars and you're not eating any, glucagon is going to be released. It's going to tell your liver to make glucose. Okay? Are there any other questions about that? If it's still a little bit fuzzy to you, the lecture I believe it's overview of physiology. She has 2 slides that go over this as well. So if you need pictures, that will work. Or if you wanted to stay after with me, I can explain it. Fantastic. All right. So yep, our kidney does that. What does our pituitary gland do? Releases hormones. Exactly, right? Great. Creates our hormones in the endocrine system. Fantastic. What does the heart do?
Pumps blood through.
Pumps blood throughout our body. What about the nerves? Exactly. Send signals to our brain, right, from the external environment. Awesome. And our kidney functions to filter our blood or maintain osmolarity. So we're talking about the urinary system. The kidney is what's the main player in that system. Okay. Fantastic, you guys. Yep. So ectotherm relies on the environment to maintain its body temperature. What about endotherms, right? What do they do?
Like they do it themselves. Regulate like in the body.
Mhm.
They don't need the environment.
Yeah, exactly, right? Just like we're talking about vasoconstriction, vasodilation. It's all an internal process to regulate our temperature. Yeah. So we're an example of endotherms. An example of ectotherms are most of your reptiles, right? All right. All right, fantastic. That is your digestive system. Your cardiac system, right, is responsible for getting blood to all of your tissues, right? And in that blood are dissolved nutrients, dissolved oxygen, right? We're getting all those to our tissues. Lymphatic system, we briefly talked about, right? We're turning lymph or liquids from our tissues back to our bloodstream. Okay.
So does lymphatic system work with the kidney? I assume it's that's
So it is involved, so they're kind of intermingled, right? So liquids that are I'm going to try and do this without giving you too much information. So when you are creating urine, you have pressures that cause blood to be filtered out to the kidneys and pressure that opposes that. If the pressure to push liquid out of the blood vessels is too high, then you have liquids entering your tissues. So the lymphatic system will take that extra liquid and bring it back to the vessels. Before it does that, it assesses what's in that liquid to see if there's anything there that shouldn't be, okay, and then returns it. So yes, it does work with the circulatory system. It also kind of works with the immune system as well. So very strong roles in both of those. Does that answer your question? All right, anyone else? All right, so can anyone tell me what ingestion is?
It's like actually like putting the food in your mouth.
Exactly, right. So ingestion is the physical act of putting food into your mouth, whereas digestion is the chemical, mechanical breakdown of that food. Okay? Is that clear? Or do we need another? So ingestion is when you're taking in the food, you're eating it, physically eating it, but the actual breakdown of that food into its chemical units is digestion. All right. We'll go ahead and move on.
Yeah, I had to like re-enter my name, that's why I wanted to.
Oh, no, you're good, you're good. All right, pepsin. So two of these are found in the stomach. Can anyone tell me what the other one found in the stomach is? Hydrochloric acid, right? So this is where the start of the chemical breakdown of your food is, but most of that happens in the small intestine. But proteins are actually fully absorbed, fully broken down in the stomach, and that's using pepsin, okay? Where can lipase and bile salts be found?
Kidney?
Not the kidney.
Liver.
The liver creates the bile, right? It's stored in the gallbladder, but where does it act?
Is lipase the enzyme that breaks down fats
It is.
in the intestine?
Yes, right. So where is it?
In the intestine?
Right, the small intestine. So the small intestine is where most of your absorption occurs. Okay, most of your breaking down of nutrients. Specifically, you have the bile salts. The bile salts, before I go into that, or to lead up to that, and Aaron will probably remember this explanation. So can fats be broken down in water? Can fats dissolve in water? No. Do you want to remember why?
They need another chemical to be broken down.
Possibly. Let's think about the properties of water, right? This is kind of a throwback to exam 1. Is water polar or non-polar?
Polar.
Polar, what does that mean?
Has a charge, stronger on one side.
Exactly, right? It has a charge gradient, right? So we have a partial positive, partial negative. Thank you. So water is polar. But what are fats? Are fats polar? No, they're non-polar, right? Meaning they don't have a charge distribution. In order to dissolve in water, you need to be polar, okay? And so fats can't dissolve in water. And if you ever poured like oil into water, you'll probably see that the oil kind of clumps together, right? And so the clumping of that oil makes it harder for the water to interact with it, right? That becomes a problem in our intestine. If we're trying to break down those fats, we don't want them to aggregate together. We want to break them down into smaller parts, right? So bile salts will come in and help to break up the accumulation of fat, okay? And after that happens, my lipase will come in and chemically break down those fats, okay? So bile salts help to separate the fat, right? Separate them, keep them from forming big clumps of fat molecules. The lipase will then come in and chemically break down each of those fat molecules. Okay?
And this is all happening in the small intestine.
Correct. All right, you ready to move on? All right. So the physical term, which it is kind of squeezing, but the sciencey term for this is peristalsis. So peristalsis is the movement of food along the digestive tract due to kind of like steady muscular contractions. Okay? Does anyone know what chyme is? Hint is associated with the stomach. Whenever your partly digested food is in the stomach, it's interacting with that hydrochloric acid and that pepsin. The stomach is squeezing it. That kind of soup that's made in the stomach is called chyme. Okay. I should say mouth, not mount, sorry. So that's probably confusing because it says mount and just say mouth, sorry. So your upper digestive tract includes your mouth, your esophagus, and your stomach. Your small intestine is in the lower digestive tract. Okay? So I probably threw you off because of the mouth. So mouth, esophagus, and stomach are included in the upper digestive tract. And I'll fix this before I post it online. All right, so gastric ablation is not a type. We have sleeve. Can you want to explain to me what the sleeve gastrectomy is?
It's not just taking out a portion of the stomach.
Right. Mm-hmm. Taking out a portion of the stomach. What about gastric bypass? So with this one, you're also decreasing the size of the stomach. You like cut it so it's only like the size of a golf ball, I think. But then you also have a tube that leads that directly into the small intestine, a lower part of the small intestine. So a lot of the nutrients that you eat isn't actually getting absorbed. So think gastric bypass is twofold. You're both decreasing the size of the stomach, but you're also decreasing the amount of nutrients that can be absorbed because you're making a beeline to like a lower part of the small intestine. Mostly absorption happens in the duodenum or like the first part of the small intestine. With gastric bypass, you're avoiding the duodenum and going to a lower part of the small intestine. Okay.
With gastric bypass, after like I guess the person's in a healthier, like is healthier, do they go back and fix it so they get the nutrients back? Wouldn't that be unhealthy after a while?
I would think so long term, and I think it can be reversed. I've heard of people getting bypassed several times, but yeah. So I think it can be reversed after you get to a healthy weight.
I've heard of sleeve gastrectomy being used for like weight loss and stuff like that, but with gastric bypass, that's for more serious medical problems because that's causing actual non-absorption anymore.
Right. So I would say definitely gastric bypass is for those more severe cases.
Yeah. Are they all used just for like reducing weight or other reasons? If you know, I don't.
See, I'm really not sure, but I'm not sure of another reason why that we would use that.
Yeah.
So I think it's more commonly used for bariatric surgery, although it may be used for other reasons too.
Okay.
So, but yeah, gastric ablation isn't at all a thing. I would say you don't have to know a lot of details, but to be able to tell between the two. No bullet point definition like what we just discussed. Okay, that would be useful. Any questions about those? Okay, so what structure present in the small intestine aids with the absorption of nutrients? So villi, awesome. So cilia and flagella are actually ways that individual cells can move. We probably talked about that in exam 1. Villi kind of look a little bit like cilia, which is weird. But can anyone tell me what villi are? Explain to me kind of what they look like.
Aren't they like look like little hairs kind of?
They do.
And just absorb the nutrients in there in the small.
Yep. Do you know what type of tissue covers them? What
muscular?
Well, so what tissue functions in absorption? Epithelium, right?
Isn't there like I remember you telling me, isn't there like their whole purpose just to increase the surface area that can be absorbed, that can absorb stuff? Just by having these little hairs all coated next to each other.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. So villi, they function in absorption, but they also function in increasing the surface area in the small intestine, right? So it's something like the surface area in our small intestine is equal to like a football field, okay? So a lot of surface area there, a lot of absorption. Okay, and villi are what make that possible. All right. Right. Awesome. So our functions are to reabsorb water, right? So when we're making in to eliminate stool, and in our colon, we are kind of concentrating that that solid waste. And we do that by taking out the liquid. Okay, so in the small intestine, we have the absorption of our polymers, well, our monomers, right? Our physical, our nutrients, our chemicals. And after that, the colon is responsible for absorbing that water, okay? And then excretion of stool. All right, any other questions? All right, awesome, great. So fungi do not have a digestive tract. What do they have? You want to remember what they do have?
Starts with an H.
It does.
Hyphae?
Yeah, awesome, thank you. What do they do?
Don't they like help just like the actual structure and the formation of it, or no?
They do that. And they also function in digestion. Do you remember, Aaron, how they do this?
How about they digest things?
Mhm.
Do they like release a chemical that just breaks down stuff around them, and or it breaks it down and they absorb the liquid that has the broken down stuff, and like it digests it outside their body and they absorb it back into the foods.
Exactly. All right. So here with fungi, all the digestion happens externally, right? So they have their food, they excrete those digestive enzymes, and then they take that already digested material up into themselves. Okay. So really the big point is that digestion happens outside of the body, right? So if you look at your bread and you see mold there, that's what's happening, right? They're excreting digestive enzymes and taking that nutrient. So that's a delicious thought.
I've actually got to be telling, but thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, next. Fantastic. Awesome. So we'll talk about that. You guys seem very strong on it.
It's a multifunctional digestive
Cavity. Perfect, right? So all of those are in our cardiovascular system. Can anyone tell me what the vessels are? There are 3 different types that we talked about. Arteries, veins,
capillaries?
yeah, and capillaries. Thank you. So arteries, veins, and capillaries are our 3 types of vessels. Okay. Fantastic. All right, hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that is responsible for carrying our oxygen, right? And hemoglobin is in our blood. That's actually what gives our blood its red color. Okay. All right, great. So the way I like to think about this is arteries away, right? So arteries, if you ever see an artery, it's always taking blood away from the heart. Opposite to that, you have the vein. So veins are always taking blood back to the heart. Can anyone tell me what capillaries do? What's their function? Hint, they are the smallest ones. Capillaries function in gas exchange, okay? So they're very small, they're intermingled with your tissues. That's where the oxygen leaves the blood and enters the tissues, right? The capillaries are responsible for providing the nutrients directly to the tissues, okay? So capillaries, that's where gas exchange happens. Arteries take blood away from the heart. Veins bring blood back to the heart. Okay, so can anyone tell me why there's a higher blood pressure in the arteries? Yeah.
Because if it's pumping blood away from your heart, it takes more pressure to push it out into the rest of your body.
Perfect, man, you could teach this. You could teach this section. Yeah, that's a perfect explanation. So we have to be able to have that pressure to take blood to all of our tissues. And also, if you think about it, right, your arteries are what are directly receiving the blood after it's being pumped, right? So your arteries, once it gets around to your capillaries and veins, you very much lost some of that pressure, okay? So arteries have your highest blood pressure. Yeah, awesome. All right. So, right, can anyone tell me what my 4 chambers of the heart are?
Right.
Exactly, right? Those are our 4 chambers. All right, so again, heart contains 2 ventricles, 2 atria, right? The left atrium and ventricle contain deoxygenated blood, right? So actually our left and right ventricle contain the oxygenated blood, okay? And then your right and left, your right atrium and left atrium and oh my gosh. Your right atrium and right ventricle contain deoxygenated blood, okay?
Wait, can you repeat that? So, wait, did you say the 2 ventricles contain oxygenated blood?
So your left atrium and left ventricle contain oxygenated blood. Your right atrium and right ventricle contain deoxygenated blood.
Okay.
Yes, so just exact opposite of that.
Why is that?
So, okay, I'm going to show you something really quick.
Isn't it kind of like because it's the way it comes, like the right atrium, right ventricle, it like starts there and then it goes to the body. And whenever it comes back in, then it's oxygenated. Once it comes back to the valves. Right?
From the pulmonary circuit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think this diagram will help to show us. Oh. Sorry, I'm a grandma of technology. So this is your systemic circuit. Your systemic circuit is concerned with getting oxygenated blood to your tissues, okay? This is your pulmonary circuit. The pulmonary circuit is concerned with taking deoxygenated blood to the lungs so they can be reoxygenated. Then that oxygenated blood is returned to the heart to be pumped to the body, okay? So it's like your systems are like two figure eights, okay? So in my left atrium and ventricle, right, because remember she said that the heart sides are in respect to the patient, right? So if you look at yourself and your left is the left heart. Have a look at you, it looks like my right, okay? This is your left atrium, so if we're gonna start here, your left atrium contains oxygenated blood. That blood goes from the atrium, the left atrium, to the left ventricle. What is this artery here? This artery that's directly fed by the left ventricle. This one here. It's the great artery that helps. Starts with an A.
Aorta?
The aorta. Okay, so I would know that's an important word. Your aorta is the great artery that receives oxygenated blood and branches off to smaller arteries that take oxygenated blood to tissues. Okay? So we go from our left atrium to our left ventricle through our aorta. We branch off, this doesn't show it, we branch off to other smaller arteries. And then what are these right here? Capillaries. Right? This is where gas exchange is happening. Then we have our deoxygenated blood. If we're taking our deoxygenated blood back to the heart, what must this be? Must this be an artery or a vein? If we're going back to the heart. If we're going back to the heart. Veins. Awesome. So we're taking our veins, and we're going back to the heart. Now we're in the right atrium. Right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary artery. Okay? Our pulmonary artery takes our blood to our lungs, where we get reoxygenated through our lungs. These are our capillaries. And then we go through our pulmonary artery, which takes our oxygenated blood back to the atrium, to the left atrium. Okay? So this is why we have oxygenated blood at our left side of our heart and deoxygenated blood on our right.
Should we know what you just showed us and like the names and like how it goes to the heart? Because I don't.
Okay, so here's what you should know. Know the difference between the systemic circuit and the pulmonary circuit. What does the systemic circuit do? Takes oxygenated blood to tissues. Perfect. What does the pulmonary system do? Takes blood to the lungs to get reoxygenated. Perfect. I would know the difference between those two systems. I would also know that there are 2 atria, 2 ventricles. What are these things that restrict the movement of blood through the heart? What are those things called? Valves, right? So I would definitely know the pulmonary and systemic circuit. There are 2 atria, 2 ventricles. I would know the valves, to just know what valves are, right? They restrict the movement of blood one way. I would also know what your aorta is. So I would know that your aorta is the great artery, right, that takes oxygenated blood to the tissues, right, branches off to other smaller arteries. And I would also know that the pulmonary artery takes deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs to be reoxygenated. Okay? Are we okay with that, or we need to?
So when you have a heart attack, but where exactly does this go wrong? As far as like I guess, does it not go back to the lungs and then you stop breathing? Or?
So what is a heart attack?
Your heart stopping, stop pumping blood.
Well, yeah. So it's caused due to a decrease. You're not getting, the heart itself is not getting nutrients, right? So we see all this happening, right? All this fancy systemic circuit. Is that giving nutrients to our heart? I don't know if she showed you this.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a different artery, right, that gives nutrients to our heart called the coronary artery. So the coronary artery is not seen here, but if for some reason there's a blockage, right, in our coronary artery, so we're not getting oxygenated blood to our heart, that's what causes a heart attack. All right, and we'll talk about it's due to the buildup of fatty deposits in our vessels. Do you remember what that's called? Or anyone remember what that's called? When we're the accumulation of fatty deposits in our vessels. Restrict blood.
An A.
Yeah, is a long word.
It's like atherosclerosis.
Yeah, arteriosclerosis.
Yes.
Yeah. So artery kind of is in there, so I can help you remember. So arteriosclerosis, which I think there's a question later, but that is the blockage or the decreased flow of blood due to accumulation of fatty deposits. Okay. If we restrict our blood flow too much, then we're also restricting the blood flow to the heart. And our heart is always working, right? It never stops beating. So it needs a constant flow of nutrients. If we decrease the amount of nutrients that our heart gets, right, then our heart can't function properly. And that's when a heart attack happens. Okay? All right. Let's go back to part 2. Fantastic, right? That's the order. Awesome. Our pulmonary artery goes where? Lungs. Great, so this will be our valve. So if you can answer these kinds of questions pretty confidently, knowing a bullet point definition, I'd say you're in pretty good shape. Great, that's a hard one, right? What about a stroke? What happens with a stroke?
No blood's going to your head.
Right, decreased blood flow to the brain. And so does anyone remember the acronym for how to spot if someone's having a stroke?
Fast, faint arms, slurred speech, take action.
Awesome. All right, we'll move on. Great, so we already talked about this for pulmonary and systemic, right? Systemic taking blood to our tissues so they receive nutrients, and then pulmonary, we're going to the lungs to reoxygenate. Fantastic, right? Arteriosclerosis. Can you remind me how this occurs? How do we get a buildup of
Fatty deposit.
Yeah, I just thank you. So arteriosclerosis is caused by a buildup of fatty deposits in your vessels. So this is part of why it's damaging to have a bad lifestyle, right? Eating a lot of fatty foods and things like that. Eating too much could cause a buildup, right? Decrease our blood flow. So that's why you see these kind of issues happening a lot in people who have a poor lifestyle or have weight issues. Okay? Okay, great. So this is a stroke. Act fast. This is here to remind me about tell you about the acronym, but Arabella already told us, so thank you. What about an aneurysm? Does anyone remember what an aneurysm is?
Isn't that when a vessel in your brain pops, or maybe not a vessel, I don't know if that's what it is, but it pops and has external bleeding.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely, right. It's a weakening, right, of your arteries. And the weakening causes kind of a bulging of the artery, right? And that bulging can eventually cause a complete popping of the vessel, okay? And it makes you bleed internally, so it's very damaging. It can happen to many different areas, but it's particularly bad when it happens in the brain. So, great. I would know the different problems that can happen with the cardiovascular system, heart murmur, aneurysm, stroke, heart attack.
What happens if you have an aneurysm in lots of different parts of the body?
So I know that an aneurysm can happen like in your kidney, and that can be very bad. I'd say areas where there's a lot of blood flow, kidneys right there are filtering the blood, it can happen. I think if a vessel pops in your kidney, depending on the severity, it could require you to get a new kidney, like to have to remove that one. So yeah, I'm not sure about other areas in the body, but I know that when it happens in a kidney, that's really bad too. Yeah. All right, any other questions about aneurysm, strokes, anything like that? All right, so what are our two types of circulatory systems? Yeah, closed and open, okay? A closed circulatory system is when your blood is always contained in a vessel, okay? Always contained in a blood vessel. And so that's what we have, right? We have a closed circulatory system where all of our blood is contained within our blood vessels or within the heart. It's always in a closed environment. For an open circulatory system, it's not always contained in a blood vessel. There's like a cavity, right, where blood's just there, okay? So just think open, the blood is not always enclosed in a vessel or in an internal environment, whereas with closed, your blood is always enclosed in a vessel.
So what's an example of, like, do some animals have open?
Yeah, I think crickets have an open. I think it was a cricket. It was some kind of beetle. It was in your slides, but they have just like a cavity where blood just kind of is around all of their organs. It's not contained in vessels, but it's just hanging out in there. Yeah. Again, I don't really like bugs, and so bugs are weird. Yeah. Any other questions about open versus closed? And constant actually isn't one, so don't get confused with that one. Open cavity that just has blood in it. Closed is always in a blood vessel. All right, so this is our last one. You have to all say yes. Awesome. All right, so that's in the Kahoot. I'll make the changes and upload it to Blackboard probably in the next 20 minutes when I go home, or I'll do it here. But yeah, so I'll upload that. Does anyone have any questions about anything before we head out? Or? Oh, okay, so this in the video will be uploaded in a few minutes. All of the worksheets are up and posted. If you send me a picture of the worksheets to show me that you've tried them, I'll send you the key. And also the outline is up there. The outline has some helpful videos in there that are good for learning feedback loops, circulatory system, and digestive system, and some stuff that still doesn't quite make sense. So yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Good luck on your exam. Have a nice night. Thank you.